Hi, and welcome to Suffolk Public Library's Get Creative. I am outdoors today. I'm out in the lovely reading garden that we have behind the North Suffolk Library, and we are going to be doing a Impressionist style painting of our garden today. We're going to be painting in plein air, which just means I'm outside. I encourage you to do yours outside as well. Um, and, get outdoors, get to whatever green space you have, whether that means you're coming to our garden out back here or to your garden if you have one at home, a park if you don't have a garden at home, wherever you want to be. I encourage you to do this one outdoors because, as you'll see, I'm going to be moving around a little bit just to get a couple of different angles and kind of combine them into my own space, into my own painting. I encourage you to do the same. It absolutely is in line with the Impressionist ideas, and we'll be talking a little bit about that as well. So, we're going to be using watercolors today, but if you are a little bit more comfortable with another painting medium, oils, acrylics, whatever, you're welcome to do that. I just personally think that watercolors are a little bit easier to travel with for an in plein air type of situation that we've got. So we'll go ahead and get started. First, we're going to talk about really just getting started with talking about some of our color theory and how we want to do some of our lights and our colors today, because Impressionism is all about catching the feeling of a moment rather than necessarily an exact representation of, what something purely and exactly looks like. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the colors and the theories the Impressionists work with, and we'll go from there. Alright, so one of the first things I'm going to do before I even start working on the kind of beautiful scene that I have in front of me is just get a little bit familiar with the colors in my palette here. So I recommend you do this, especially if you haven't used a particular set of paints before. But in general, it's a good way to kind of get reacquainted with your colors, especially if it's been a little bit. So I'm gonna do just some test colors and use a sheet of paper and just pull some test sheets or some test prints, do some swatches of my colors from my palette and just get familiar with the colors that are in here. And kind of as I'm doing so, getting a little bit more comfortable with what does it look like, say, full strength with, quite a bit of pigment in it? What does it look like quite thinned out? What does it look like, perhaps mixed with another color in here? Or are there any colors in here that are reminding me of the colors that I have around in my space here, in my garden? So that's what I'm going to do first, and it's what I would recommend you do. You don't necessarily have to do it first thing, but I do recommend you do it before you really start painting with too many of your pieces, especially if this is a new set that you're working with. So I'm just going in, and since they're watercolors, I'm going in and I'm going to saturate my pot of pigment, and then just painting a little swatch. I don't know how well you can really see. Cleaning off my brush. I have my little jar of water down here. I'm going to do it a couple of times for each one. Again, trying to get a couple of different versions of my pigment, trying to get a good sense of it. how well it thins out, whether it gets, whether its value gets any darker, whether it gets any darker, or does it pretty much stay its same color. So when you're doing this, I recommend you leave your darkest colors until the end, and that you do really try to clean off your brush well in between, because you can get a little bit of bleed between your colors. I'm already thinking that this kind of soft purple might make for some nice shading, some nice shadows. Sometimes we like to think of the warm colors, our yellows, our reds, our oranges. We like to think of those as sort of our highlights. We don't just have to... Hello! We don't just have to take the value down, we can change the temperature of the color in our different spaces. And that kind of helps, in a very impressionistic way, it helps kind of reflect the way that, the sun makes things feel a little bit warmer, especially if you think about, light coming through leaves, sunlight coming through leaves. Yeah, this yellow is really nice. This will be a fun one for some highlights. But especially if you think of, sunlight coming through leaves, you have on even a single leaf, the spot where you really have a lot of sun coming through is both lighter but also a little bit warmer. There's a little bit more of a yellow tone, versus the spot that's shaded is a little bit cooler, has a little bit more of a blue tone. And all of them obviously within that green space, being green. But if we're stepping into our Impressionist shoes today, then we can, really just exaggerate those colors a little and say, well, what if it is actually just yellow? Or what if it is actually like a deep blue or a teal or something in those shadows? So the Impressionists are really all about capturing the impression, the feeling of a moment. So it's not necessarily imperative to make it, photo accurate, but it's about the feeling of it. It's emotion accurate. So what you're looking for is to catch color and light and motion and ideas, the feeling of it very accurately, or as accurately as you can. You're really trying to catch those as much as you can, versus, oh, well, I didn't get my line perfectly straight. Oh, well. That's fine. Because we'll be doing, fairly broad strokes. This isn't the smallest brush. It's not the largest, but it's a medium-sized brush. And sure, this is what I'm using for my swatches, but it's probably what I'll do for a good amount of my painting as well. But yeah, especially if you're not very familiar with watercolor, or you don't play around with watercolor very often, I do recommend you do just a swatch page, just to get comfortable with the medium. See how things look with a drier brush, see how things look if you paint, do the wet on wet technique first, right? So how does it look if you saturate your paper with your paint water, your plain water first? And then you come in and you drop in a little bit of your color, and it'll be a lot more sheer. You can get like a nice, very pastel kind of sheen of color. Almost an iridescent, and it kind of very easily blends in versus your block that you get on a dry section of your paper. So I definitely encourage you to just play around on the on your blank sheet as you're getting used to some of these, both this specific palette, these specific paints. We're getting into some of the green, and I imagine we'll be dipping in quite heavily on the greens today. So we're painting our lovely garden. We have, as we can see, a good healthy amount of green around us. So let's see what it looks like when we really saturate our brush, really let that water sink in onto the paint. And it gets quite a bit more pigmented. We pull in quite a bit more color, but it's still on a quite yellow side. So you can see these are the two versions. This one is very early, but it hasn't really sunk in. The water hasn't really sunk in yet. And then we've let it saturate a bit more, and then you can layer a bit more on top. If you want it even darker, or even more strong of a color. Imagine we'll be dipping into this one quite a bit today. Let's go one up to our dark green here. Let's see how this one is. Ooh, so this one's got a little bit of blue to it. It's almost bordering on a teal. So this is our sort of semi-dry pull of this one. And let's wet it a bit more and see how it pulls from there. So I'm just really moving that water around on the surface of the paint pot. Really mixing it in and saturating the brush. And then it pulls quite drastically deeper on that one. This one will be really lovely for some of our shadows. And even here you can see that these are quite different temperatures of green, right? We have our very yellow toned, quite warm green. This is a much more cool toned, very bluish green here. So these will be lovely to play around with. And I imagine we'll be playing around a little bit more, even just mixing in some other colors. Some strokes of some other, even some surprising colors that maybe aren't actually on our leaves and such, but we'll have some fun with them nonetheless. So just to quickly finish up our swatches so that we kind of have a reference. I recommend you do this in the layout of your palette as well. Just sometimes it is helpful, especially with some of the darker colors. They're a little hard, so they can be a little hard to see which color is which, especially if it's, differentiating between the purple and black and the brown can sometimes be a little bit difficult. So laying them out on your swatch sheet in the way that they're laid out in your palette can help remind you, okay, yes, this one this spot is actually the black, versus, okay, well, I know that this one was black, or that I know that I have a black on here somewhere, but I've forgotten where it was. So, we've got our swatches pretty much done here. And of course, I'm doing these pretty quickly just so that we can move on, but you'll see that I left some of these quite quickly. So, but this gives us a general overview, and these will be helpful just for referencing as we are looking around us and just trying to see, okay, which of these blues looks more like the sky, right? It's like, well, honestly, today, it's kind of a bit more like this one if we thin it out, right? And if we had looked just at the pots, we might not have thought that, right? We might have just said, oh yeah, it's this light blue, obviously. Because the sky is light blue today. But when we actually tested them, this one's coming through really bright, vibrantly. And if we thin it out just a little, desaturate it just a little, I think we can get the color of the sky that we have today. So I'd still encourage this, especially if it's a palette that you're not familiar with, or if you haven't worked with it in a while. It'll just reacquaint you with kind of your colors and get you thinking about what are the colors that are surrounding you today. So we've got that done. Now we're moving on to looking at our space here. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at kind of what is our big focus. And I'm going to rearrange you slightly here and just kind of give you a quick zoom around. Because, here's a secret, you don't actually have to be stationary, stick in one place, and only paint from this one angle, right? So, for me, this angle is kind of a bit more like this, right, from where I'm sitting. Where I have a little bit of this tree, and then these bushes here, and then the cupola. But if I were to try to include all of them in the exact way that they're laid out, it wouldn't fit too well, or it would be a little bit busy maybe. And there's an angle on this tree that I know from walking around a little earlier that I kind of like better. It's like a little bit more of a dramatic V swoop on this tree from Nice if I sat a little bit further over there. So I think I'm gonna do more the angle that you see from over there. But I still like this angle and this positioning on the cupola. And then we still need to get the sky in, right? So in a way we're gonna get, it's almost like bringing in a little bit of cubism as well. Or at least the idea of kind of combining a bunch of different perspectives onto a single snapshot. Because again, we're looking at getting the impression of what is the feeling of being in this garden, what is the, best view of it. So please don't feel like you're tied to sitting in one spot and only painting the exact, thing that you see in front of you from exactly that spot. Because you absolutely aren't. What I do recommend is, because watercolors specifically can get a little tricky if you try to remove any color, especially for things like our cupola or our clouds today, is we'll want to leave mostly those spaces alone. So we'll want to kind of have a rough idea of where we want those on our thing. We don't necessarily need to sketch it out too much. If you feel more comfortable sketching it out first, you absolutely can. I am going to only sketch out where I want my cupola and where I want my clouds. And maybe like just the general shape of the tree. Okay, here's my big V for where I'm going to place my tree with this lovely split trunk. But everything else I'm going to leave out of the sketch. And I'm going to do it with this white pencil, just so that it doesn't muddy up, because a pencil can get very hard. Once you paint over it with watercolors, you won't be able to erase it, and then you have your pencil line, which isn't very impressionistic to have your hard pencil line. So I'm going to do it with this white pencil, but you're welcome to do a white pencil or a light colored pencil if you'd like a light pink or a light blue would work as well. I also, if you're comfortable just winging it, go for it, just wing it. I'm going to go ahead and start just doing my quick, here's where I want my cupola. So what we're wanting to do is generally work from our lightest colors to our darkest. That way we actually have some ability to kind of add on the colors. Watercolor in general is pretty additive as a medium, so you're going to do sort of your broad areas of your kind of lightest color, and you're adding in sort of your small bits later. So I'm going to do kind of my broad sections as much as I can. I'm going to do my light wash of my lightest green first, and then I'm going to go in and touch up some of my darker areas, because my blue value oddly is going to be darker than my green value. So I'm going to start with my green value general area first, and then come in on my kind of other spaces. So let's get started on that. And this is a good time to kind of, if you are interested, especially if you are looking at a quite light space, or you have like a really, really light color that you're trying to get done, to like work on your your wet on wet technique. And as you can see, I have my sections kind of, my paper just taped down here onto my board. If you want a nice clean line all around, you're welcome to tape actually all the way around, and then you'll actually get a nice edge. I'm just going to come back and clean up my edge after, so that it goes all the way to the end of my paper, but so I'm going to just put some color down. I'm going to play around with it. I'm going to try to not, because I can just barely see my edges of my, where I put down my cupola sketch. So I'm just going to just barely go right up to that edge with my green. Because we have obviously the trees that go right behind it and that tree line. So that's what we're just filling out now. And just kind of creating that kind of wash space behind it. And then grabbing a little bit more color from the pot and just dabbing in. And remember, if it feels like it's too light, that's fine. You can always add more. It's just a little bit trickier to take it away. It's possible, but it's a little bit trickier to do so. I'm going to bring this all the way around the bottom to down here. So I'll end it. And if you're ever worried about, oh, well, it's not exact, it's not, well, that's not what we're doing today. We're not doing anything exact today. And just to be mindful that the fact that we're doing this outside means that potentially, especially if you're doing it on quite a sunny day like I am, that your watercolors might start to dry a little bit faster on you. So to just really work in sections and just re-wet your area as you need it. And with just getting the general colors in, we might come back and actually change the values because our grass here is a little bit lighter in general tone. We've got a little bit of our small little wildflowers mixed in. So when I finish it, I'm gonna do some little dabs of maybe some yellow for buttercups, some teeny tiny wildflowers, and they're probably just going to be just the tiniest little dab of color for each of them. But just really thinning out this pink that we have down here. And bringing a little bit more pigment into this upper tree area, and even pulling in a little bit of our cool tone green, our shadows. What we can do with this one, we can dab it around like so, up in our green, up in our area, and then just take some fresh water and swirl the colors a bit together. What we'll be doing in especially our trees and things is making several series of layers of our paint, which is part of why we're going to be working in watercolors, is because our layers will be very easy to accomplish, because paint is going to dry quite quickly today. And then just coming in and cleaning up our line around where we want the cupola. There we are. And having this little bit cooler tone in the trees, but not the grass, is also going to help us differentiate from this, just kind of what's currently a green blob on the side of our painting. And obviously once we add a little bit more, it'll be easier to tell, but for now, it's going to help us kind of differentiate for ourselves what we're doing here. So, we have our general space of both our trees, generally, and some of where we have our grass. And then we'll, the rest of this will be some of the bark for the bottom of the planter section. So, the next big area that we need to fill in is going to be the sky. And I'm actually going to, when I fill this, and omit the the building behind us. We're going to pretend like there's no building, that we're out in the middle of the wilderness or something. Or just a lovely garden out in the middle of nothing. So, well, let's see. Let's also give a blob of green for our leaves for our big tree. So it's going to be impossible for you to see this on camera, but with my white pencil, let's focus. Hello. So with my white pencil, I did sketch just a V for my general trunk space for the main two split trunks for the tree. So I'm just going to do a quick mass of where I'm gonna have leaves. We're having a little bit of wind today, so I'm gonna kind of start already moving my my pigment for the leaves in this sort of direction, in the direction of the wind. And we'll do a little bit more of that when we're working on it a little bit more specifically. But it doesn't hurt to start it now. We'll have that sort of, again, motion, movement, color, tone. Those are the things that we're focusing on when we're doing a sort of big impressionist piece. And I'm going to leave this one as, again, just our light green for right now. We're going to eventually change it, bring in some other colors. But as we're just trying to plan out our space, this will be just fine. So we were thinking that we actually are going to take this dark blue and thin it out quite a bit to get our sky. We've got such a lovely sky today. let's go ahead and pull it. And don't worry too much if you're starting to have like a section bleed into another one. The biggest thing is if you have anything with a hard line. So for me, it's the cupola that I have kind of a pretty hard line for it. But everything else, the Impressionists in general had, pretty fuzzy lines all around. I like to say that I have a natural advantage on painting impressionistically because I wear glasses. I have a pretty strong prescription. So I can just take off my glasses and I see the world like an impressionist. So I'm already kind of thinking in that blurry mind space. That's a little too much water. And I encourage you, if you're looking to really differentiate your spaces, is to already, as you're laying out your backgrounds, is to already start differentiating the way that you're doing your brush strokes. So I already started when I was kind of adding in some of that movement from the wind into my big trees leaves. But also I'm going really just side to side with my sky. And if you look really closely at the sky, you can see that it gets darker blue as it goes higher up into the atmosphere, so we can make it, lighter coming down. I'm going to leave the lower sections alone until we fill in with our, bushes and things that we have to go next. But filling in. So for here, I don't have that much filled in quite yet, but I'll finish it up a little bit later. So just wanting to make our sky nice and smooth. That's the biggest thing with this sky, is it's really a smooth gradient. And that'll be one of its biggest differentials. This is where we are right now, and it kind of looks like a mess, but we are working through all of our spaces still so far. So I've got some lovely kind of reddish bushes here. So let's try and get something. Also, it'll be nice to have a color that has a little bit more variation in the temperature, like a nice warm tone thing in here. So the big challenge with that is that we don't have a good, like, maroon, right? If we're looking at it again, if it would like to focus. If we're looking at it, sort of only the very edges, the very outsides of it are even very particularly read as red. Really, most of the inside is like a dark maroon or even a brown. So I think we're going to need to take our purple, maybe a little bit of the pink, and some brown, and kind of layer all of those colors, kind of mix all of those together to get all of those tones to really show up. But we'll place those in this sort of area here, and then we'll keep going. And I just realized I forgot to leave space for my cloud, but we'll see what we can do about that in a bit. I'm going to start with my purple here to define some of these, and it comes underneath. The largest of these bushes comes underneath. And so two behind the other. There's some that are behind the other that are a little bit obscured, so we really only see the top bit of them. And I kind of like the contrast that they give the reeds in front of them, so I'm going to keep that again. These are your paintings, you get to choose, but I'm going to keep that kind of perspective. I'm going to start with the purple because it gives us a nice medium point to both go darker with our brown and warm it up a bit with like some pinks and some reds. Okay. I'm kind of daubing around because we've got, it's not really moving, it's not really swaying in the breeze like either our more reedy type pieces in front of it or the leaves on the big tree. So it'll give some contrast in the way that it moves, or rather doesn't move. So it gives that kind of contrast there. And we're going to put a little bit of this pink in. And again, we're just placing it in, just kind of daubing it around to try and get some connection to the color that was there. We need it to be a bit darker. We need it to be a bit more brown, but we don't want it to be too muddled. I've got a couple of little dots of brown in here, but I don't want it to go too far in a brown direction. Mostly because I quite like a very colorful piece. I don't want to be too tied to it being photo accurate. But just a little bit of brown warms it up. Let's bring our red in.
we've got our red right just at the top. And we're not gonna want to add in the black while this is all still wet, mostly because black is very demanding as a color. It really sucks up a lot of space, and can make it hard to do anything else really. So you can see these colors are really blending together nicely, and that's what we want right now, but we're going to want to darken these up a bit eventually. But we're going to save that until this layer dries down and we're doing more of our texture. So we'll save our black and our darker values for later on in our process. But this way we get our space, we have our kind of general space blocked out for it. We have our general area. A couple of little red spots down along the side. So we have our general area for this sketched out. While we're here, we might as well do our reeds that are in front. And the ones that are here are about the same tone as the grass and what we have for the leaves on this tree. So what I'm actually going to do is just make them a little bit more blue in tone, really, than what they are, just so that we don't end up with a piece that is only one color, or very dominantly one color. I'm going to use our darker green and just try to thin it a bit. And again, we're starting this piece with its, we're laying its foundation, but we're also doing it in that way that we already want the strokes to be, if that makes sense. So it's a very reedy piece. I might actually grab one of my smaller brushes for this one, because it's going to be a little bit more detailed. And again, we're having it sort of flopping around here. So there's our general sketched out space for that, which, yeah, sure, it's not necessarily the most accurate if you were to look at it right now, because it's got like the brown dead pieces at the bottom and things like that. That's fine. I think we get to have a little bit more of a colorful garden. We get to paint what we would like to see in the world rather than what we necessarily have to. So, yeah, we're almost at the point where we're gonna get started on our cupola. And let's see, how do we want to do this? We might actually take this off and You can absolutely use the lid of your... I'm going to try to thin out some black and some brown together with quite a lot of water, just to get the right color that I need. Because it's grayish. And then coming in. But knowing that if I had mixed that in the actual pan of the pot of the paints, then it would be absolutely way too dark. Here we're able to mix up a nice light toned gray. Eye up on me here. So the way that I'm doing my columns and what I'll mostly do for filling in my space is I'm doing my edges first and then grabbing a little bit of water, thinning out my mixed up gray and using my extra thinned gray and grabbing just a little bit of that color from either column side that I've already painted. Using that and just grabbing a little bit of it as I go down so that it is slightly darker on either end, but it doesn't actually read as, outlined. I'm gonna have to mix up some more gray here soon. Because if you look at a piece, right, it's not actually going to be, with a lined, defined outline, right? And sure, it's fine if you want it to have one, but we're just grabbing color. For now, we're not going to do the shading. We're just filling in our space. We are going to catch up and do shading in a minute. And I'm unfortunately kind of covering up some of my reed, even though it's supposed to be in front by quite a bit. But that's just going to, we'll have some more detail on top, and he'll be all right. We're just smoothing our sections. And you can come in and grab. So the roof of our cupola is actually a slate gray, so it's got a little bit of blue to it. So when we do that, we'll actually want to add in a little bit of blue. We're taking just our slightly darker to catch our shade. And then we've got columns on the back that we don't want to forget about. So those are going to be our slightly darker as well. And if you want to clean up some spots, then you just take some of your water with no other pigment on your front columns and just clean up those edges a little. And especially if you did your background, your shade, and you have to, clean that up, it's very easy to do that. Take that water and clean it up a bit. So we've got that so far. And now we're going to grab our slightly larger brush back again. And we're going to try and do our wet on wet technique for the dome of the cupola, because it's like a nice soft slate gray here. Now our gray, but also just a tinge of our blue. the tiniest little bit. And because it's this like wet on wet technique, it thins out really nicely. So even though this is our darker blue, it's going on very, very thin, very light. There we go. All right. So now we get to fill in what's between our columns, because we kind of left those alone. So we've got trees, mostly, a little bit of sky. We'll do trees. Kind of trying our best to match the way that we did our trees before, with our sort of two tones of green. And remembering that these are obviously going to be even further in the background, so they can be even blurrier. And then very last, we're going to make another blue. It's not. You can let your blue of your sky kind of bleed in to your trees a bit, because obviously that's what's behind your trees. Even if they look kind of opaque, they can bleed in a bit. That's fine. All right. So we have about half of it is pretty done. And now it's about time to get started on, filling in our darker values here. So this is where we really get to add in some of our texture, and hopefully a lot of your space has dried off. So I'm going to start on this side. I'm going to start on this side of the piece because it is dry, so that this side can finish up drying a little bit. So I'm going to actually fill in the trunk and everything of our tree, finish that up, and then we'll keep going from there. We'll kind of move now from this side to this side of the canvas with our details. Or, as detailed as we are going to get today, which, if we're honest, isn't going to be particularly detailed. So we're just going to go and if you really want to get this accurate, you're welcome to actually look at your tree and get it very specific. But In my mind, I think trees are best done as a quick gesture. The more you think about the trunk, I'm gonna add in a little bit of shade here with a pretty dry brush. Really grabbing. This watercolor can be quite transparent a lot of the time. So if you're trying to get the blue, trying to get your trunk to cover your sky, you have to go over it quite a few times. But it'll go in pretty well into your leaves because the won't. Almost dipping my brush in the coffee here. That would not help us. So we could stop here, but I think it would be more fun if we added a little bit of color to our trunk. Don't you? I'm going to add in some orange just to give it a little bit of dimension. I'm going to add in this orange on the opposite side that I added my black. And again, a fairly dry brush. And we're doing quick, pretty large strokes here. And I'm just gonna lightly rinse my brush and just kind of get them to talk to each other a little bit. So I don't really want them all blended per se. And just come in with some dabs on top with just my pure brown to kind of give that texture of the bark. So now that we've got some better color, we need a little bit more texture. So we've got the good movement, but we want all of the things. We want movement, texture, color, all of it. I think that's about what we can do with that while it's all still wet or relatively wet. Let's work on the leaves a bit more. I'm gonna fill out our leaf space a bit more. Once I've finally actually laid down my branches, I'm kind of lacking in leaf space. these leaves we're going to have a lot of fun with. But right now, coming in fairly dry brush, re-wetting our paint as much as we need to. Ah, look at that sun coming out again. Lovely. And just placing this down around. I'm not worrying too much if we start blending our colors together. We've already got some of the new greens now, or some more of our more pigmented greens. But I really wanted to bring in some good yellows for our highlights for when the suns are coming out, just like right now. I'm just gonna come in with some little tubs of this really bright true yellow here. Absolutely getting my brush saturated. And we're just tapping it really around. We'll need to clean up this section a bit. When we've got our yellow down, we come in for our dark green. And this is what we want. At least some of our shadows. We can't have light without shadow. And actually, I may do that with my smaller brush. Just having a little bit of variation in the brush size is sometimes quite nice. It looks like you aren't just doing the same thing. So with this, I'm just doing little circles. And right now I'm just kind of distributing everything very equally around, but if I'm really paying attention to the tree, I know that the center area near where most of the branches are and where most of the leaves are is going to have more shadow to it, which is where more things are, right? And the edges are going to be a little bit lighter, there's less competition, so we can add a little bit more of our dark green. It'll still allow everything else to shine through. But it kind of gives that very real feeling that the center is where we get most of our leaves. And a couple of dots really very thick. You see, very thick on the brush. do a couple of drops of this, actually covering our branches as well. So now we'll do a kind of similar thing over here. Start with that. And so if there are any spots that you see that still feel a little too, like you can see the white of the paper underneath, you can just even grab some water and kind of move your colors around from the space around it. That's what it looks like if it just kind of gently moving the colors around. And we can come in with a bit more of a fresh color. Fill it in a bit. We used our sort of lighter green as our background. We can also use that one as our fill-in tone. Also with our small brush, we'll go ahead and very a lot of water on your paint. On your dry surface. You really want it to thicken up here. Really get it saturated. A little drip. That's all right. And here's where we can reintroduce our little bits coming over. Do I have a smaller detail brush? I do. So I'm switching between brushes a lot here, but you really don't have to. I'm just very finicky. this sort of towards the middle here. Let's maybe make a little bit more of a move on our kind of purple brushes. We add a bit more purple to them. This purple, this is pretty much as dark as this purple really ever gets. It's like that opportunity there. Deepen it. Ones in the background as well. Just dabbing it in. Really. And we get to decide, this is how we like it. Do we want a little bit more warmth? Do we want to grab a little bit of our pink and bring that warmth down a bit? So that it doesn't stay too cool tone. Even just a touch of a red, all the way down. Just our dobs there. I think that we've got some differences there. Now I get to decide how I want to do the background, because in front of me it is actually building. But I think we'll do a nice little path, kind of a sidewalky path. And that'll only need to come around to the outside of this. So I'm doing just our wet on wet technique with the little tab of the black to grab some of our, to make a little sneaking path around here. This is going to still be mulch, I think. But then we'll have to contend with shadows, and we'll figure out how exactly we want to do our shadows, because that's really some of the most beautiful that we can play around with. But we'll just keep this as mulch for now. Then it also helps us clean up the bottom of this area. And again, it's your painting. You get to decide what is in your world. So if you wanted this to actually just be grass, it can totally just be grass. But I think it just being brown mulch is a little bit boring. So I'm wondering if I'm just going to put a little bit good pink. Yeah, we'll have like a little bit of a pinkish. The big challenge is keeping it differentiated from both the bottom of the tree and our lovely bushes. But we can come back and give the tree, a tiny bit of definition again. And now we get to fill in this whole back section with more. And remember, we want it to get lighter as I get closer to the ground, so we'll actually pin it. So to just thin it out, we're just going to grab a little bit of fresh water. Go ahead and use this as a good time to fill in the rest of our little spots that we've got to clean up. Make the sky actually fill in. I know that we're looking at it, I'm kind of seeing that my path is looking, it's not really looking gray, it's just kind of looking like nothing. So I'm going to, I think, make it a little bit darker. And maybe even do like a defining sidewalk line, you know what I mean? Now we've got some sidewalk sections and it looks a bit more like. Really want to say, well, there's also a little bit of grass just to help it blend into the sky. You get to make your decisions however you want. Alright, now our background on this side has completely dried, so we get to make more of those. I'm putting in a little bit with our darker green, mostly to help it differentiate between our other greens, but also to give it a little bit of depth. I don't like how that line happened. I'm just gonna smooth it. But here's another opportunity that we have to kind of look at our space a bit more. What is actually around. And there's some really shiny leaves that we have. They're almost shining with like a bright light. I'm actually making some, let's see how it looks. If I actually bring in a couple of little dots of pink around. Or you can experiment with just having them in a single section, as if they're like little buds on a tiny little section, on a single tree, right? We still have our yellow. We can bring in some orange if we want. But I encourage you to make it quite colorful if you want to. But if you decide that you don't really like it, you can just grab a little bit of your water and smooth it back out. It's not going to fully erase it, but it'll help kind of minimize. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of, just to give it a sense that we have several different trees and it's not just a mass of green, I'm just making kind of different clouds of my different colors that I'm daubing in. So I've got, a section where I'm daubing in my darker, and then I had that section of like little pink. So we have a couple little pink flowering trees in here. And then let's see, what else should we have? We do another section that's a little bit brighter, and with this brighter green. It's really standing out against the sky. And you absolutely don't have to only keep them in their little cloud sections. But I think having the areas where they are more prominent helps them kind of stand out and seem like distinct trees rather than just our painted background where we were really just laying down the color just to kind of give us an area to work with. Again, we're really just doing dots, and don't worry too much about making it look like leaves. I'm Absolutely. I've painted both a million leaves and 0 leaves at all today. So I want you to kind of keep that in mind. So we've got our sort of flowering background trees here. And the last big thing that we need to do is our grass area here. So I'm going to see if I can get I'm having a lot of fun with different brushes today, and I'm playing around with this. This is a fan brush, so it has like a lot of little bits, and I'm just pulling still our mid-tone green, but this helps give that texture. But you can absolutely still do this with just your regular detail brush. And we're still going in fairly dry. And we'll just cover our whole space like this. All the way up. The whole area. That's our whole zone here. I'm also going to do a little small section as if there were like a little flock of buttercups. Just right over here. Just because I think, if you've ever driven by a little field full of buttercups and you can just see them and it makes the whole field look yellow. They just are so lovely. It makes me so happy. So I'm just going to include them, even though again, in front of me, there aren't really any on that spot. There are some on a different area, but I'm going to make them happen over here a bit. And I'm also going to include a little bit of this light blue as well. Just a little bit of depth and a little bit like our lovely little small blue wildflowers that we have. Just tiny little ones. So, the last thing is that we don't really have clouds painted yet. So if you want it to be a cloudless sky, you're done. If you wanted to have some clouds, you probably should have planned for that. I forgot to plan for them. But I'm gonna do my best to kind of space out some fluffy guys here by just pulling in water and trying to lift up some of them. And you can use in your white here if you'd like. White watercolor is kind of notorious for not doing a whole lot, and mostly being used for mixing. Yeah. have a semblance of a cloud. Mostly I think we can define a little further down. Yeah, it looks like I forgot to paint a section of the sky now. So if you would like clouds, if you would like a cloudy day, or little wisps, you might be able to achieve wisps a little bit more easily. The little like wispy clouds. You don't want that dripping all the way down. But you can, kind of rub it and remove some. This is the challenge of doing watercolor and trying to show you is that it will drip. So I gotta come back and clean up that, but pretty much we're pretty much done here. This is what are more or less final. With Impressionism, you can pretty much stop whenever you feel like you're completed. That's one of the beauties of it, is that you get to say, oh, well, this feels like it, because it's all up to your feeling. So this is where it feels like we're good to go for me. You could say, oh no, I'm still feeling inspired, I'm still feeling like there's something here, and you can keep going. I encourage you to keep adding more color to it, add colors, maybe even some that you don't even really see. Go in for some more cool tone colors on your shadows, and your warm tone colors on your highlights, to really grab some of that feeling that you have of being outside, especially if you actually are painting outside. But yeah, please don't feel beholden to what exactly you see in front of you, and I encourage you to go outside, make something, enjoy some of this wonderful spring weather that we have, and you don't have to feel like you're held into making something that looks exactly photorealistic. That's not what this is. That's not what we're trying to do here. You're trying to make something that, basically, today, we're trying to make something that feels like spring, right? So, you can just really go in and have fun, right? If you have requested a supply kit, you will have one available at your requested pickup branch. We'll have the watercolor paper, watercolor kit. Pretty much the only thing that we won't have for you is water itself, or this big board, in case you are actually going outside. But just a regular clipboard will work, or even just something to bear down on that you don't mind potentially getting a little bit messy. Everything else is all good. Everything else we'll have for you. And we will see you next month for the next one. Bye-bye.